Epstein files deadline is long gone. When will more docs be released? It's been a month since the congressionally imposed deadline for the Department of Justice to release its files on Jeffrey Epstein. What's the latest? The Justice Department said in a January 27 court filing that it expects to complete processing millions of files on convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in the near term, but did not provide a timeline to release the information to the public as required by law. More than a month has passed since the deadline set by Congress for the Department of Justice to publish all its Epstein files, and upwards of millions of documents and photographs have not been released. In the filing, DOJ said it has made substantial progress in identifying documents and redacting victim identifying information from emails, text messages, and video and audio recordings. Hundreds of department employees are working diligently to complete this review as expeditiously as possible without compromising victims' privacy so that its production can be complete, the filing states. In November 2025, Congress overwhelmingly passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which ordered the Justice Department to release all its documents on Epstein, who died by suicide in jail in 2019. President Donald Trump signed the act into law on November 19, 2025, giving the Justice Department 30 days to release all its files with the exception of those that could violate victims' privacy or jeopardize federal investigations. In the final hours before the December 19, 2025, deadline, the department began to issue a tranche of emails, photos, and other documents related to Epstein. But only a fraction of the department's files were released. And of those that were, many of them arrived to the DOJ's so-called Epstein library with heavy redactions or no context. The department also didn't provide a written explanation for all redactions, as the law also required. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said at the time that lawyers were still sifting through the materials to make sure victims' names or identifying information weren't accidentally released, and that it would likely take several weeks to produce the remaining pages. With 5 weeks already passed since that deadline, here's the latest on the Epstein files release. Millions of files still being reviewed, DOJ said earlier this month. The Justice Department said in a court filing earlier this month that nearly 13,000 documents had been posted to the Epstein library so far, but up to 2 million more still need to be reviewed. In a January 5 filing addressed to U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmayer in New York, Attorney General Pam Bondi and Blanche said 400 lawyers and 100 document analysts were reviewing the documents to ensure victims' names were redacted. Another court filing said the department has made substantial progress in the review process since the January 5 update, but did not specify how many more documents were still pending review. The department is coordinating resources for this review from various components and offices. Leadership from these various components holds daily calls, sometimes twice daily, to address progress, coordination, deduplication, reviewer questions, victim issues, and technical issues, Bondi and Blanche said in the January 15 filing. The Justice Department did not respond to a request for updates on when more files will be released and when all the documents and photos will be available. The January 27 filing states that the hand review of several millions of pages of materials, including internal department communications, documents acquired and created in the course of various investigations, as well as audio and video files obtained during those investigations. The department is not able to provide a specific date at this time and cautions that its ongoing processes, including its quality control checks and document management system preparations, may require additional efforts to ensure the protection of victim identifying information. The filing said about when the process will be complete. Congressional push for independent review denied. Reps. Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, and R. O'Connor, a Democrat from California, who led the effort to force the release of the Epstein files, asked a judge to intervene in the review process. In a January 8 letter, the lawmakers asked Engelmayer to appoint a special master or independent monitor to ensure the Justice Department complies with the law to release the Epstein files. The conduct by the DOJ is not only a flagrant violation of the mandatory disclosure obligations under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, but as this court has recognized in its previous rulings, the behavior by the DOJ has caused serious trauma to survivors, the letter said. Bondi and Blanche filed a response arguing that Massie and Khanna do not have a legal basis for the request. On Jan. 21, Engelmayer denied the congressman's request, saying the federal criminal case is not the place to determine whether the Justice Department is complying with the law. Epstein files deadline is long gone. When will more docs be released? It's been a month since the congressionally imposed deadline for the Department of Justice to release its files on Jeffrey Epstein. What's the latest? The Justice Department said in a January 27 court filing that it expects to complete processing millions of files on convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in the near term, but did not provide a timeline to release the information to the public as required by law. More than a month has passed since the deadline set by Congress for the Department of Justice to publish all its Epstein files and upwards of millions of documents. Trump's Venezuela oil sell-off sparks corruption concerns Washington, D.C. In the weeks since the United States snatched Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, the Trump administration has been selling the country's oil stash, netting millions of dollars and prompting concerns from lawmakers and industry insiders about corruption. Those concerns will likely surface on January 28 when Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifies before a Senate committee about the Trump administration's ongoing involvement in Venezuela. The Trump administration accused Maduro of heading a vast narco-trafficking network, as it zeroed in on Venezuela this past fall with a massive deployment of military assets and deadly strikes on boats off the country's coast. Now that the South American leader and his wife are jailed pending a federal trial in the United States on related charges, Trump has said his administration will control Venezuela's oil reserves, the largest in the world. Trump has since unveiled a sweeping $2 billion deal to sell oil from Venezuela's reserves, which are controlled by a state-run company and have been off limits for years to all American companies but Chevron. Venezuela's oil stockpiles were backed up by the Trump administration's blockade of oil tankers and years of U.S. sanctions. Trump aims to get Venezuela's oil flowing to American companies, and says the United States will control the proceeds from those sales. Venezuelan oil is already flowing into refineries in Houston, Trump told the New York Post in a January 24 interview. Let's put it this way, they don't have any oil. We take the oil, he said. Sen. Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, said Trump wanted to control the oil for his friends. Boy, this would be a coup. The oil industry having full access to the world's largest petroleum reserve, he said, during a January 7 speech before the Senate. Democrats will likely grill Rubio on the multi-billion-dollar oil deal on Jan. 28. Some, such as Murphy, who is on the committee, have already slammed it as murky and ripe for corruption. The administration has so far sold $500 million worth of oil, depositing some of the proceeds in a Qatari bank account controlled at the Trump administration's discretion. Lawmakers have begun raising questions about how those funds will be handled. A group of Democratic senators sent letters to more than a dozen executives of top banks asking if the Trump administration asked their institutions to hold Venezuelan oil proceeds, exclusively reported earlier this month. More than a dozen Democratic senators sent a separate letter on January 21 demanding that Trump officials disclose any financial interests in companies involved in the extraction, processing, or sale of Venezuelan oil. Taylor Rogers, a White House spokesperson, said in a statement to If not for President Trump's bold action and courageous leadership, Venezuela would still be controlled by narco-terrorist Maduro and Venezuelan oil would still be enriching our foreign adversaries. The historic U.S.-Venezuela energy deal will restore prosperity and security in Venezuela, safeguarding the economic and national security interests of the United States. Scrutiny for two companies to win Venezuela oil licenses. Experts say the lack of supervision of Trump's Venezuelan oil sell-off could be a breeding ground for corruption. Trump signed an executive order on January 9 designating revenue from the oil sales as funds paid to or held by the U.S. government on behalf of the government of Venezuela. 4 Venezuelan banks were handed the first $300 million in proceeds to sell dollars to Venezuelan companies in need of foreign exchange currency, according to Reuters. These are Venezuelan funds, and they are outside of the U.S. regulatory framework. It's not clear what legal framework, if any, binds them, said Francisco Rodriguez.